So 10 years. When you first started what would become Pittersplatter, did you think that 10 years was something that you were going to get to?
You know, I don't think I've ever really, you know, at a time, I think when I started, I didn't really look down the road. I've always, and now I really don't look down the road either. I always just kind of focus on the here and the now and kind of focus on what I'm doing at the moment and stuff. I've always kind of held to the whole belief that, you know, I'll keep trying, I'll keep doing this until I die and things like this. But as far as Pittersplatter, I never really put too much thought into how long it was going to last. I always had an idea for where I wanted it to go and what I wanted it to sound and look like eventually. But you know, I had no idea that it would go 10 years, you know, as long as it has now. So no, I didn't really, you know, think about back then how long I was going to go for. I just knew I wanted to do something for a long period of time. I think that it really happened probably around 2001 or so.
Mm-hmm.
I had found some electronic artists back then that were, at the time, you know, I was in that metal band, and I was very much into black metal and things like that. And getting into black metal through that, I had found some really crazy electronic, because a lot of those black metal bands had electronic side projects.
Mm-hmm.
And I found some really crazy stuff, and I think it was around 2001 I decided, you know what, I'm going to do a side project that's electronic, because I was in a metal band, you know, and screw around with that. But I didn't really actually seriously get into it for a while. I dicked around with a couple programs and stuff. But I think as far as Pittersplatter becoming a concentrated idea moving forward, in some respect it was around 2001. It's always been, you know, me through and through. I've always used the word project because I don't want, I mean, Pittersplatter's not a fucking rock band.
Mm-hmm.
Point blank. We're not a rock band. We're not, you know, I sit in the studio and I write and record everything by myself. And then I have, you know, I get live people to help me out on stage. And, you know, that changes sometimes. You know, one album I'll decide I need a certain configuration for live, and the next album I may need a completely different configuration for as far as live members. Mm-hmm. So me, in my mind, whenever I say when I think of a band, I think of like 4 or 5 people who are constantly together, constantly playing music, writing music together. When I think of project, I mean, that's what Pittersplatter is. It's my project, point blank. You know, when I first started Pittersplatter, I didn't really want it to be a live band. I wanted it to be this kind of, this online little corner of its own, to where people would go to, you know, like Pittersplatter.com or some kind of a site, and they would get regular albums and they would get regular videos and imagery, and they wouldn't really know the forces behind it. But I always wanted the look in that imagery to be very monstrous and also mythical. Mm-hmm. You know, I've always been a huge fantasy nerd, a huge role-playing nerd, things like that. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I always wanted to become something very monstrous on stage, not a person on stage, but an actual kind of a creature, disfigured type, you know, whatever, some kind of a phantom. But I didn't have the means to do it for years and years. When I got talked into basically taking Pittersplatter live, I look back on it now and I feel that I jumped the gun, that I was out there before my full vision was really set up, you know.
Right.
And I just kind of smeared my face in a bunch of grease paint and went out there, and that was about as monstrous as I could get for the time. But, you know, it was always kind of going to where it's gone now, you know, nightmare creatures, things like that.
Now, oftentimes, you know, anyone who's familiar with, you know, some of the music scenes out there, they're gonna try to compare you to acts like Mortis, Mushroom Head, other masked bands. Like, how do you feel about being compared to bands like that?
Depends on who they're comparing me to, really.
Yeah.
You know, the only reason why people do it is because of the masks. That's it. Mm-hmm. I mean, I could probably write an album that sounds exactly like a Mushroom Head album. Mm-hmm. And if I didn't wear the mask, I wouldn't be compared to them.
I'd like to, you were talking about getting out and experiencing live shows before you really felt that you were probably ready as far as your vision went. And maybe even perhaps your sound. Like, tell me about some of those early experiences playing.
Well, our very first show ever was in Enid, Oklahoma. And, we're talking about, Oklahoma's a state that hasn't seen electronic music live, really.
Mm-hmm.
They've seen DJs for quite a while. But, as far as a band getting up there with just electronics and saying, hey, this is what you're going to swallow, no, it hadn't happened. So our very first show, I was really kind of nervous about it. I didn't know how it was going to go. It was only a 2-man project back then, 2-man live project. And, I had a guy with me. He played on like a keyboard stack. I think we had 2 synths back then, or I don't remember. And then I get out there with a microphone and grease paint. And that was it. And when the show first started, people were very fucking confused.
Mm-hmm.
But as it went on, it was a real short set. I only had like 4 or 5 songs that I thought were worthy of live, and they weren't. But as the show went on, the light bulb started going, and people started to figure out this is what's going to happen.